Why do we keep listening to Pearl Davis? Hello, good people. It is Todd Shannon, data scientist, social commentator, getter of buckets. And you know, Pearl Davis was on Tim Pool talking with Lauren Chen. Lauren Chen, pretty smart. Tim Pool, pretty smart. Pearl Davis, not so much. I'm just saying, I do not understand the appeal of Pearl Davis. I think the more we keep platforming her, the more we get. And I'm not about canceling her. I'm just saying she's had plenty of chances to make her general point, but people keep putting her on their platforms to say dumb things. And I think what she's saying is obviously pretty absurd. But even when we put her on, even the absurd things she says, we don't even necessarily, I guess, attack with a proper intensity or vigor, if I can put it that way. And so I feel the need to do that. So I like Tim Pool. I like his content. Tim Pool's not conservative. He's conservative adjacent, right? You know, he's kind of a common sense guy. Lauren Chen is a conservative. Neither of them Christians, as far as I know. Maybe Lauren Chen is a Christian. I don't know. But in any case, Pearl Davis is doing the thing that she does. Once again, Pearl Davis saying that women are bad and men are not bad. And even when men are bad, it's women's fault. And so let's just have a quick look at this conversation because it is quite fascinating.
You tweeted out later to clarify, Lauren, that yes, evil does come from women.
Yeah, well, because I would just look at every problem in society. It all comes from women.
To be fair,
there it is. Every problem in society comes from women.
I just realized this the other day, but did you know that Hitler was made by a woman? That proves it.
Well, it's like you look.
Now, I just want to point out something here. Tim Pool, he makes that little comment and he's trying to, I can tell that he wants to be like, Pearl, come on. Don't be stupid. She doesn't even know. I think it probably went over her head. She doesn't even know that he's clowning her. He's trolling her, and she doesn't even get it. So she doesn't pick up on it. But that's kind of what I expect from Pearl because she doesn't seem to me to be all that sharp. But let's continue.
You look at the homeless. Most of them come from single mother homes. You look at school shooters. Most of them come from single mother homes. You look at criminals, rapists. Most of them come from single mother homes. You look at what happens when women get power. So when men get power, they build societies. They do awesome things. When women get power, we're just not very good with it.
I just brought up Hitler. I mean, I kind of feel like there's a lot of bad dudes,
Well, yeah, but there's also bad queens, right? If you look at queens the last 500 years, women are more likely to wage war. Women are way more violent with power, and we see that in society. Look at what women are doing in the court system today. What is more evil than breaking up a family? And women do that all the time.
All right, so let's take a quick pause there. A lot of things that Pearl said there. What Pearl doesn't understand, and what people seem not to be too quick to point out to her, is that men and women provide a different kind of development and guidance for children. So what you generally see when men are absent is that what you see when fathers are absent is that children lack discipline. They tend to be behavioral problems. And men do provide the majority of the stability when it comes to that. Women provide a different kind of nurturing. Women make sure that the children are well-rounded emotionally, that they receive the love and affection and what you get, particularly what you get from boys who aren't properly nurtured and loved by their mother, is you get boys that can be very violent towards women. They don't have empathy. This is, you certainly don't want a young man who doesn't have any emotional intelligence. He's all aggression, hasn't interacted with a woman, understanding how you ought to treat a woman. So men and women provide different things. And what Pearl doesn't understand is that just because men and women provide different things, that doesn't mean one is better than the other. They both are necessary for the development of people. So this is, notice that Pearl is always saying, all of the bad people come from single mothers. Therefore, women are bad. It's quite silly and sloppy logic. And I'm going to show you something in a bit here that will kind of illustrate kind of how society works, because she also operates under the paradigm that women somehow develop independent of men's actions and input, which is also quite naive.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say most problems in society come from women.
So that's interesting, because I watched your conversation with Michael Knowles, which I thought was really interesting. And in it, you were very adamant that people need to take responsibility for their own actions. So when it relates to women, it's not really an excuse to say, oh, well, feminism brainwashed me. You still made the decision to sleep around. You still made the decision to get an abortion.
I think if you get an abortion, you're responsible.
Okay.
Right?
Shouldn't we have that same standard when it comes to the rapists, the men? You made a decision, you're responsible. It's not really like, oh, but my single mother. Like many people have.
And they are responsible. They go to jail for it.
They are responsible. They go to jail for it. Is there a more clear example of a non sequitur than they are responsible? They go to jail for it. Do you understand that taking responsibility and being punished for your actions are not the same thing? There again, this is what I don't understand. Like, Pearl Davis obviously has like such, she clearly doesn't have thorough critical thinking skills. She says things all the time that are so silly that if anyone decided to call her on it, like almost everything she says is irrational or doesn't quite meet the standard of, okay, if we take that to its logical conclusion, it still makes sense. But she doesn't. No, they're not doing that on this. So that's what we're doing.
But you have to look at, there's significant differences between single mother and single father homes. And I can't help but notice that all of the men that seem to lack morals, they were raised by a woman.
Right. But is the answer then that evil comes from women? We are kind of leaving out the fact that, yeah, a man actually left the parent or his family in that situation.
Well,
there are some situations where a woman doesn't want the man there.
But most of the time, men don't leave. Women are the ones that overwhelmingly leave. And if you really dig in, if you actually do the work and interview men that are the known to be like deadbeat dads, most of the deadbeat dads don't really exist. They're exceptions. They're not the rule.
So,
and if you actually do the work and interview these guys, there's men that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars fighting for their kids. And unfortunately, we're in a society where women can claim abuse. They could say he emotionally abused me and not see his kid for years.
Real quick, what's the stat? I know that there.
I just have to pause there. So notice this is Pearl's typical MO. When men do something wrong, or if men are not in the picture or something like that, it's the women's fault. And women are bad, and there's no such thing as a deadbeat dad. Every time just think about how stupid. Just think about how stupid that is. Anytime a man is not in his child's life, it's because the women didn't want him or because they lied. I cannot tell you the number of women who would love to have their babies or their children's father in their lives. My mother was one of those women, but it's not about my personal experience. But Pearl's weird anecdotal. She has there's a famous story of this guy named John Money. John Money is the father of kind of modern gender theory, and John Money, a lot of his ideas came from these weird quote studies that he did. He interviewed men in prison about their sexual, fantasies or proclivities. And these men came back with all types of weird and perverse and depraved stuff. And what he didn't realize is that he was interviewing a very specific portion of the population. Men who are in prison are not the same as men in the general population. I think people should understand that. As a data scientist, you understand selection bias is a real thing when you're doing studies. But he extrapolated that what these men revealed in his studies about their sexual proclivities, he extrapolated that to the general population. And so just think about that. A bunch of degenerates. I mean, just keeping it 100. A higher population of degenerates are going to have a lot more degenerate tendencies. So this is the same thing. This is the same issue that problem that Pearl makes. Pearl doesn't really interact with mainstream society. She interacts with this very narrow section of society, and she thinks that she can extrapolate from what her anecdotal experience is with those people. She thinks she can extrapolate that to society more broadly. So she talks to a bunch of men who have a bunch of women who might be crazy or whatever their situation is. They might be abusive or manipulative, and she thinks that's representative of women in general. Or, these men that tell her these sob stories about how, my ex-wife won't let me see my kids. That's not a typical situation. That's just the people that you interact with because that's your whole brand. And to me, it's kind of a grift because all she does is provide fodder for men who might have a tendency to fall prey to her lies and to her kind of propaganda. That's why I always say that Pearl is to the red pill community what the OnlyFans girl is to the corn model, the corn addict, I should say. Corn, you know what I mean by corn, right? I don't want to say the word because I don't want YouTube to like this video. So let's get back to it and hear a couple things.
There's stats on women initiating divorce more, but how do we say that, a fatherlessness is predominantly driven by women? Is that what you were saying?
Yeah, because women are choosing to leave, and the number one reason is irreconcilable differences.
But that's when you're talking about single mothers who are a result of divorce. If we're looking at single mothers who were never actually married, it's not. It's a very different group of people.
So this is why I say Lauren Chen is a smart cookie because, once again, Pearl Davis, in her anecdotal limited experience, because she's certainly not a social scientist. She doesn't understand the whole concept of selection bias. Women who are divorced, yes, most of those women initiate divorces, right? But what about women who are never married? And I can speak to this with respect to the black community because in the black community, unfortunately, most people who have children the majority of black people who have children are not married and were never married. That is a completely different population than married, divorced people. It's just a very different population. And so in those scenarios, what you do is you have men who just wanted to smash and dash. A child was the result of it, and so they decided to dip. But I want to deal with this. There's something that I think Pearl, and I know that those of Pearl's ilk might not actually benefit from this, but I want to show you something because I think this is illustrative. This is a supply and demand curve. You may have seen it. And the reason why I wanted to show this is because what is illustrated by a supply and demand curve, there's some principles we can take from this that I think aren't always kind of obvious when we talk about these kind of complex situations. So if you look at the supply curve, the supply and demand curve, you see the S there. That's where that represents the supply, and where the D is, you see that represents demand, and where they meet, where they cross over, determines the price at a given quantity, right? So it's, mathematically and socially, it's a breakthrough. It's a very, very important concept in economics and understanding the behavior of people and how they react to pricing. But the question about this is that, well, which one is more important, the supply or demand? Which one impacts the pricing more? And if you ask that question, then you don't understand this equation at all, because supply and demand is not about which one affects the pricing more, because the supply has an impact on the demand, and the demand has an impact on the supply, which in turn has an impact on the price. So there's all kinds of complex interactions where neither of these elements, Neither the supply, the demand, or the pricing is independent of the other elements. So the way to think about this is like, okay, just think about it from a consumer standpoint. What you desire, what you have a demand for, depends on the price. It's not an absolute categorical thing. Like if I might say I want a pair of Jordans, but I don't want a pair of Jordans at $300, right? At that price, no, the demand's pretty low. If Jordans cost $50, I'm at the store tomorrow buying like 3 pair, right? So the point is that demand depends on the price. But you see, only consumers want the price low. Suppliers want the price high. So when the price goes up, the suppliers want to provide more product because they want to sell more at a higher price. But when you have more supply, that drives the price down, right? When the price goes down, then the demand goes up because people want to buy at a lower price, and that pushes the price up. So you see this constant push and pull and these interactions between these elements that determine the quantity and price. And the way to think about this is, now let's substitute men and women for supply and demand. And then let's have that the interactions between men and women be the product of society, right? So the question is, which one impacts society more, right? Now, Pearl, because she's naive, she's saying, well, the women impact all of the situations. The women are responsible for all the negative outcomes. But women do not develop independent of men. Women are also a product of the fathers in their lives, whether they're there or not. Women are also the product of what they observed in their family dynamic. So women don't develop independent of men. Neither do men develop independent of women. So to say that one has more impact on overall society from a standpoint of the overall output is silly, because there's a similar dynamic to what we see in the supply demand curve that we will see in interactions between men and women. Now, from a spiritual standpoint, which is a totally different thing, men are supposed to be leaders. Men are the leaders in society and should be leaders in the home. And so if you have a situation where you don't have leadership from men, then you're going to get negative outputs. So the question is, do leaders lead? Do men have a responsibility to lead regardless of what women do? I think spiritually the answer to that is yes. And only, in my opinion, weak men make excuses and say when things are going bad, it's the women's fault. I would never, ever fix my mouth that if things weren't going right in my home, if my children didn't turn out the way they should, or if they were lacking something, I would never fix my mouth to say it's my wife's fault, because that's not what leaders do, and that's not what strong men do. And so I find it very interesting and ironic that the so-called red pillars, they are for a patriarchal society, but they also don't want men to have to take any of the blame when things go wrong. So I do find that interesting. But there are a few other things that Pearl said that are quite silly that I also want to point out, because I think Pearl, there again, is, okay, here we go. Just the worst.
But the whole point is women have all the power here. We have a million choice. You get to choose whether or not you get pregnant. Abortion's legal. So we are 100% in control of
Now just put that little thought right there in the back of your mind. Abortion's legal. Why would she say that?
who's born. So there is zero excuse to make a kid with a guy that's not going to stick around. Zero excuse.
I mean, I would also say
zero.
there's zero excuse for a guy to not stick around.
Well, but the issue you're getting is
Because you're basically saying, but what about the women though? When we're talking about the man
but
leaving.
the difference is men cannot opt out of fatherhood. Women can opt out of motherhood.
And I think we would both agree that you should not be able to opt out of motherhood.
But
right?
we can, and it's
And
not.
that
It's
shouldn't
not
be like
my
that.
point. But should whatever. Like abortion's legal. It's here to stay. Unfortunately, I don't say this because I'm happy about it, but I mean in the UK they're introducing a law where they want to make it legal up to birth. So abortion is legal, and right now men are not able to opt out of fatherhood. Only women are.
Only socially, not.
So now she's pretending that she thinks abortion is unfortunate and it's not good, but then at the same time she's advocating by if we apply her logic properly, she's saying, well, there's no reason for you to have a baby from a man that doesn't want to be a father, or he's not going to stick around. What's the only way to do that? If you get pregnant, then you have to delete the baby. That's the only way to do it. But you're not advocating abortion. This is what Pearl does all the time. It's the same thing with marriage. She's saying, well, marriage is a terrible deal. Marriage is bad for men. Oh, so you don't think men should get married? I'm not saying they shouldn't get married. But it's not good if they get married. Does that make any sense?
Physically, women in the United States overwhelmingly have the right to abort.
Correct.
Or are allowed to abort. Men don't have any say whatsoever. But socially, I looked it up. It says, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20.2% of fathers, about 7 million, are absent dads. They don't live with their minor children. So
Right, but why?
Right. So this stat doesn't literally mean that 20% of fathers are like getting up and saying, later, kid, I'm going to buy scratchers,
Yeah.
and then disappearing. But my point was just that of this, you have men who are like, okay, you're having a kid, I'm leaving, you'll never see me again.
Well, but you don't understand the circumstances, because a lot of times women make men dads that don't want to be. They're like, this is something casual. This is, situationships.
There again, she's making excuses for the men, but the women should take responsibility. Well, the men didn't want to be a dad. Well, I mean, there are a lot of women who don't want to be women. I mean, who don't want to be mothers. So she'll say in the same breath, well, if a man doesn't want to be a dad, he should be able to opt out. But also, I think abortion is bad. But if a woman doesn't want to, be a mom, she shouldn't abort their. If she aborts her child, she's a bad person. She's a bad mom. But men should be able to opt out if they don't want to participate with a woman who he gets pregnant. The logic of this is so absurd that I cannot put I can't. She goes into it. I encourage you to watch this entire video. I think we've seen enough. She even goes on to mention, like, well, women can use the Plan B, and there again, Plan B is an abortion pill, but she's not advocating abortion. Kind of absurd. Anyway, I do not understand why we listen to Pearl Davis. I think she said all the dumb things that she can say. I think we've had enough. Why don't we move on? But I want to know what your thoughts are. Do you think that the red pill community is something that is here to stay? Do you think red pill logic, such as what Pearl advocates, do you think it's sound, or do you think I'm right? The answer should be that I'm right. Of course I'm right, and Pearl is wrong, and everyone who agrees with her. But I want to know what you think. Put it in the comments. Like, share, and subscribe to this content. And if you like it, please come back. Till next time, my friends. God bless you.